Well, thank you very much, and welcome to PM Express. And as you can see from the topic on the screen, very important that 1 in 4 people in our country are poor. When we say poor, we are talking poor. 1 in 12 people cannot even afford a meal for themselves, and that's a reality. Now, the UNICEF has collected data from statistical services and agencies, and some of the results are really damning. That the richest 10% consume about a third of everything in Ghana, whereas the poor consume just 1.7. So basically just 10% of us consuming everything, and then 90% of the nation are left to consume 1.7% of what the nation has. And 4 out of 10 primary age children don't go to school. 4 out of 10 poor children of primary school going age do not go to school right here in Ghana. It will let you know that 40% of all the development in Ghana are enjoyed by the well-off. They enjoy our flyovers, our hospitals, and everything. They enjoy 40 times more than those who are not well off. And 1 in 3 children live in households that share toilets or don't even have toilets. But now you say that if you cannot have food, are you going to complain about where it is that you go to the bathroom? But these are issues that we seem to have shelved or brushed under the carpet. How is the nation ever going to develop if a quarter of the nation are poor? They cannot seem to add to any or help with the development. And so that's what I'm bringing on the table today. And sometime next week, I will raise this issue again. Hopefully that you and I will start talking, and then hopefully you and I will start doing something. My name is Anan Sakwa the fourth, and also your host. When I come back, I'll introduce my guest, and then we'll just see how it goes. Come on. Well, hello, and thank you for staying. 1 in 4 persons in Ghana are poor. That is just too much by any standards, because we all need the brains and everything. And the funny thing about 1 in 4 people poor, these are the people who cannot make $1 a day. So if you happen to walk by a television and you make $2 a day, you are not part of this poor. So don't consider yourself. You are not part of them. These are people who can't make $1, not even the standard $1.25, just $1. So if you're making $2 a day, you are not in here. I mean, but hold on. Let me, Maxwell Kunyem is the program specialist for UNICEF. And then it says to bracket special transfers. What does that do?
Social transfers.
Social transfer.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
Social transfer. But you know, the minimum age is 7 cedis, a day, which is, less than. I mean, does that automatically put all of them in this, insecure bracket? Sorry to jump at you like that, but
right.
It just dawned on me.
Good. Thanks, Nana, for having me on the show.
You're welcome.
And for the opportunity to discuss such an important national issue that often doesn't get the kinds of exposure that it requires. Yeah, the statistics that you were sharing are quite startling. And these are statistics that reflect the level of poverty and inequality that we have in the country. And sometimes when you share these statistics, you need to give a certain background. We have come from somewhere, and many people, because of where we've come from to this stage, many people are not aware of the situation we are currently. You will notice that Ghana is one of the few countries that is supposed to have met the MDG target of having poverty, you know, and the target was met ahead of the 2015 deadline. The target, Ghana actually managed to bring down its poverty rate from about 52% to about 24%, you know, ahead of the 2015 deadline. And of course, that's a very significant achievement which we celebrate. And that poverty, the level of poverty that you are looking at, the poverty lines, this is mainly an income, just using an income dimension. So the kinds of figures that you are talking about now, 1 in 4, is the current situation, you know, despite the fact that we have made a significant progress in halving poverty. The current situation is that we still have 1 in 4 people who are poor in Ghana.
Even though I congratulate and I praise us for halving poverty, we run the risk of, quote unquote, fooling ourselves, where, oh, now he has $1.01, so per his income, let's take him off the bracket. But then realistically, can a person be taken off the bracket just because they had $2?
Absolutely not. It's true that there are so many people who are just above the poverty line, and for that matter are not classified within the group of people who should be receiving special attention in order to make sure that they continue on their path out of poverty sustainably. So the figures that we actually deal with, which has to do with people who fall below a national poverty line, and this is a national poverty line. It's about 1,314 Ghana cedi, you know, annually. So these people who fall below that line is what we are discussing. But I completely agree with you that there are many more Ghanaians who are above the poverty line, but who are still vulnerable to poverty in view of the fact that there are so many dimensions of poverty apart from income. And when people who are just above the poverty line are not given the opportunity to work themselves sustainably out, they can easily descend. But for the purposes of this discussion, we just wanted to highlight the scale of the problem, even when you are dealing with the national poverty line, you know, assuming that all the people who are just above the poverty line still require support in order to make sure. But for those people who are below the poverty line of 1,314 Ghana cedi, it's still a significant part of the population. And when you come to think of it, that when you look at poverty, not just the adult poverty, but child poverty, that a higher proportion of children, you know, are poor, then it makes the situation even more alarming, you know. And in addition to the poverty that we experience, another dimension which easily slips out is the level of inequality that we have in the country.
Let's go back to the child poverty and the number of children that are poor. You see, I mean, whether you like it or not, that's your future. Those are your future doctors, policemen, teachers. Those are the people who are going to run things. So, I mean, with that level of poverty and neglect, is there no conversation triggering that, look, that's the future you're looking at? I mean, future of illiterates, you know, malnutrition kids who probably don't have any love for the nation because they haven't been taught. Is it not frightening anywhere?
Precisely the reason why organizations such as UNICEF draw attention to especially child poverty, because child poverty has got long-term effects. You know, apart from the situation where it affects the mental development of the child, it is also known that children who live in poverty are likely to transmit this poverty to their adulthood, where they will be less productive and therefore unable to earn as much income, and are likely to transmit the poverty even to the next generation. So the issue of child poverty is even more critical, and that's why dealing with child poverty at its early stages, it's one way of ensuring that you can guarantee a future for these children. When you're dealing with the adults, some people may be talking about, okay, what are the changes that you can make in the life of an adult? But for a child, they have specific vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities are exacerbated by their situation of poverty, and this is likely to be carried into their adulthood. That is why child poverty in particular needs to be highlighted, and all the efforts that need to be taken to address it has to be brought on board.
It's not on your report here, but I've heard Professor Kosa said somewhere that if the child is malnourished up until a certain age, the amount of brain damage or brain loss is so much that they're probably never able to to recoup it again. So like, it's so important that at the young age they are given all the nutrients and the love and care so that you build upon. Are we not falling into a cycle where the adults that you are trying to educate to go and look after the child have gone through that, and therefore, they also don't care that, I have 6, 7 children, my father never cared for me, why should I care? Are we falling into that trap?
That's right. One of the markers of child poverty is stunting. And stunting comes from malnutrition. And as you rightly observed, there is a window of opportunity to be able to deal with stunting, which takes place within the first 2 years of a child's life. So basically, if you want to address child poverty and you're not able to address one dimension of child poverty, which is stunting, early enough, then you miss an opportunity. And that's why issues of child poverty needs to be prioritized. They're not things that you can postpone. Once you miss the window of opportunity, you miss an important opportunity to make a change in the life of this child by bringing the opportunity for the child to develop, all the cognitive aspects that he needs to be able to make a future. So while it is important to focus in addressing poverty in its entirety, I agree with you that prioritizing the poverty of children in particular is in the right direction, because once you miss the opportunity to deal with it in the right window, then you have more or less a crisis that you cannot address subsequently in the life of the child. There are irreversible damages that a child suffers from deprivations that are experienced at the very early stages of the life of a child. So I think the idea of prioritizing child poverty, it's in the right direction, even though we make efforts to address other forms of deprivation that adults may experience. Moreover, you cannot really separate child poverty from the poverty of the adults, because children don't take care of themselves. Children live in households with caregivers and breadwinners. And for that matter, if you have an adult who is poor and a child lives in that house, he's likely to experience poverty, even in a more damaging manner than those adults. So while I agree with you that addressing child poverty is an important focus, when you address poverty of adults, indirectly you're contributing to addressing child poverty.
And then before I took you back, you were touching on inequality, which is also scary in terms of that, according to the report, this is the most unequal times that we've ever lived, where the very few rich are just getting so rich, and the mass poor are, literally struggling to survive. So, I mean, I don't know what creates that, and why is the gap so big now?
Yes, Nana, it's amazing that the level of inequality we have in the country is the highest ever. And by inequality, we're just talking about the difference between the rich and the poor. So this difference has widened, possibly because the kinds of economic development that we have achieved over the period has benefited the rich much more than the poor. And when you have a situation where for every economic growth that takes place, the rich benefit up to 40% more than the poorest, then what can only happen is that the difference between the rich and the poor will widen. So we have a situation where the rate at which we have been reducing poverty has declined, the rate. So starting from the 90s, the rate of poverty reduction was faster than we have it now. So as of today, even though we have a lower level of poverty, the level of inequality, the difference between the poor and the rich is much higher than we had in years back. So it is one of the situations which may be contributing to a situation where you're having economic growth, but the benefits of the economic growth are not getting to the poor. So unless we address the issue of inequality, we're not likely to get the kind of poverty reduction that should come with economic growth.
Maxwell, have the poor become too poor to realize their plight? On Monday, was the topic of my show, too poor to know any difference or too poor to even realize that you're poor. See, you as a media man, if I was on radio and I mentioned a slum area and I was trying to fight the social injustice for them, we have become so politically drunk that the same people that you're trying to speak out for would turn around and say, oh, no. What you're saying doesn't seem to favor my party or favor my MP, and therefore shut up. That's what I'm asking. Have the poor become too poor to know any difference? Because they won't agitate. I'm yet to see when parents marched up and said, look, there's no chalk in our schools, and therefore, we're not happy sending the children there or the food. But if you lock an MP today, the whole street will be filled up with the same parents complaining. So what I'm saying is that, have we become too poor to realize our plight? Why is that section very quiet?
Good. It's important to realize that very often when we talk of poverty, we think only in terms of income. But many of these people who we say are income poor are also poor in other dimensions of well-being. They are poor in terms of their access to education. They are poor in terms of voice, participation. If you don't have access to voice, to participate in the space, in the democratic space, you cannot even air your opinion about your situation. So the dimensions in which these people are poor are myriad. And that's why on their own, it is difficult for them to bring their situation to a limelight. That's why organizations that focus on these kinds of people need to take responsibility for bringing their issues up. One way in which people have tried to address poverty is to give the capacity to these people to come out and demand their rights from government. But as you will notice, because of the many dimensions in which they are poor, they are not able to take advantage of that space to bring up. And that's why you need the nation, you need somebody who has the moral conscience to bring this up and not expect that the poor on their own will be able to come out and bring to the attention of governments or to bring to the attention of service providers that they are deprived in these dimensions. That is why I think it is left to stakeholders like the media, stakeholders like civil society, to bring the plight of these people to the fore for the state to give it a much stronger attention than maybe we're currently doing.
So send your messages to 0560 800 000. That's WhatsApp, 0560 800 000. Or you can send a Twitter message to @NanaAnsako. Send your Twitter message to @NanaAnsako. Join in this conversation, share your ideas. Let's get this conversation going. Max, this, if you look at the alarming statistics here and the sheer numbers of it, how come it's still not making frontline news? I mean, it's there's a lot. It's not as if there's 2 people or 3 people or 1 community. I mean, it's literally, the whole country. So why is it still not frontline news?
Good, Nana. That's why, one reason why these issues do not come to the fore is that, first of all, people need to have the statistics, people need to have the data, and then people need to speak about them. People need the platforms to come up and talk about them so that the many other people who are not aware of the situation will get aware, and we can now begin to think of how to address it. So I think the starting point is that these kinds of analysis that are done using existing data, you need platforms like this. You need champions, you need advocates who will take this message and let the rest of the nation get to know about it. And that's why we are very privileged when platforms, credible platforms like yours, are able to provide the opportunity for these kinds of messages to be brought up so that Ghanaians and everybody can just be aware of what the situation that we have is and can begin to debate how we can prioritize, to deal with these kinds of situations, mainly to address the problem of those people who are in that situation and also to help them contribute to the development of the country, because we have a shared objective of having a development that is total, that includes everybody. So when we have platforms like this, we feel it's very a unique opportunity, and those people who are listening to us and those people who will get to pick up this data, we expect them to equally bring this to the attention of all who need to know and who need to take action.
Well, I'm going to take a quick break here, and when I come back, I will tell you the differences of a child that lives in Accra as compared to opportunities of a child that lives up north. Don't go away. Well, thank you very much for staying, and thank you very much for joining us in this very all-important but not popular subject, but very important. Too much child poverty, too many poor people, and yet still, there's one big cake that we all have to share, but just few people are enjoying the cake. Now, a child in Greater Accra is 10 times better off than a child in the Upper West region. The same country. Child in Greater Accra, as in school, access to hospital, access to good water, probably access to money. They move down to Accra and the same child is 10 times better off. That's a big difference.
Precisely.
So, are they asking why?
Sure. When we look at poverty generally, we have the averages, but there are different ways of checking to see, of really assessing poverty. You can look at it in terms of rural, urban. You can look at it in terms of regions. You can look at it in terms of the type of economic activity that the people are engaged in. So when you look at poverty by comparing poverty, the poverty of a child in Accra to that of a child in the Upper West region, you can see it in those terms. If you look at it in terms of rural and urban, you would find that a rural child is 4 times likely to be poor as compared to an urban child. So these are the other aspects of poverty that needs to be brought to the fore. And this is what shows the inequality. Because when you look at the average situation, it hides the differences that exist when you were to look at it in terms of regions. And that's why the issue of inequality comes in. So the inequality that we experience is not just in terms of income, as I said, in all other dimensions of well-being, be it education, be it health, you can find these inequalities between children who are, as I said, either in the Upper West and then in Greater Accra region, or between rural and urban areas. And it is this inequality that needs also to be addressed seriously as a country. Because in the absence of an analysis to show the level of inequality, people may just be looking at the average situation and think that, well, this is all okay, given the averages. But I think that's a very significant, one of the significant ways in which inequality is expressed in our country.
Now, I'm particularly concerned about the Northern Child, and I think somewhere last year I even did a show on it, that anytime there's a living standard survey, if you've monitored the last 8 years, anytime the questionnaire goes up north and you're reading it, I mean, they have a better life than the Ashantis. They have better life than those in the Eastern region. And meanwhile, on the ground, they're lacking doctors, dentists. The last time I checked, there wasn't even a dentist up north. But if you look at their health questionnaire, economic questionnaire, living standard questionnaire, there's no problem. They're fine. So then you come back and say, oh, a child up there is 10 times worse. So you're asking, hold on, is the child, are they not aware they are 10 times less? Or, so what's happening?
Nana, on the contrary, as you said in your introduction, this analysis is using existing data. These are the Ghana Living Standard Survey, the latest survey from the Ghana Statistical Service. And it's an analysis of this data which shows these disparities between, the children in the Upper West and those in the northern sector. Sometimes when you analyze the DHS data, you can also see disparities in terms of the mortality rates between the poor and the rich. So even though some of the very poor people in the Upper West region, for example, may not appreciate their level of poverty, when the data is analyzed, it clearly shows, the kinds of trends that we are. So as I said earlier, this may be a situation where the very poor are not even in a position to appreciate the level of poverty in which they are, and for that matter, do not voice it out as one would expect it. But the people, the duty of the state is to make sure that all citizens are given an opportunity to develop to their full potential. And studies, data, that is one important thing about data. When data is collected in an objective manner, it's able to throw out statistics and views that people own opinions may not even support, So I think that is a classical case where the data suggests that this is the situation. And maybe your observation about the people themselves not realizing that this is the situation could also be,
See, if somebody is not ready, and I know that, there was a forum being held, one of the coastal towns or coastal communities that's fairly deprived. And as soon as the forum started, we said, no, if you're talking about poverty, we are not poor. So how do you reach out to, somebody you've gone out to reach out to help and he's telling you, look, I'm not poor. Meanwhile, they have no water, schools are overcrowded, sanitation is bad. But he's saying, look, don't worry yourself, I'm okay.
Well, so again, that's a situation where somebody may be in a certain state of deprivation, and the fellow may not be aware that the level of deprivation requires some attention. But at least it's consoling that at the national level, some discussions are ongoing. For example, in May this year, the National Development Planning Commission, with the support of UNICEF, organized a forum on inclusive development. And the main purpose was to try and see what kinds of solutions can be thrown out to help all these categories of people who, by any objective assessments, are poor in a variety of ways, even though they may not be aware of. So these kinds of discussions, if they come to the fore and people are able to find solutions, and these solutions are taken forward and implemented, I think it will help to address the situation even of those people who are not aware of their level of poverty.
Max, let me ask you one unfair question, but why are you and I and a few neglecting, that side of society? I mean, the system, the government, the organizations, institutions. I mean, there's a neglect, but where is it coming from? Is it institutionalized? Is it deliberate? Are we all just selfish? Why? Why the neglect?
Well, I must admit that...
I know it's an unfair question.
Yes, I must admit that inequality is a situation that self-perpetuates. And unless a deliberate action is taken to address it, you are not going to get a result. I also know that even though some efforts are being made to meet the needs of the extreme poor, for example, you will find that the state has put in place some social protection programs, to try and... Sometimes it's the scale of the programs that may not be adequate to address the issues. So I think that...
On LEAP, I must say, I saw online that they've moved from 79,000 homes to 213,000 homes, even though I think they need to reach, I think, about 510,000 homes.
Precisely. So that's one example of an intervention that the state may be putting in place to try and address the needs of the extreme poor or the poor people. But the scale of it may not be adequate in order to meet the needs, either the scale or the quantum of benefits that are given to these people.
But I mean, assuming even if we had a pot of gold there, I mean, and is it not just too many people, and we should be rather lifting them out of poverty rather than just sort of keep them there and give them handouts till when?
You see, the scale of the problem requires a certain scale of solution. And as I mentioned earlier, the forum that was held to discuss how to achieve an inclusive development, how to have a development that benefits everybody, including this category of people that we are talking about, identified a number of measures. Some of those measures are already being implemented, but as I've indicated, the scale or how focused those interventions are not sufficient. So I will say that not that everybody may be looking, in some sense, people may not be aware of the scale of the problem, but in another sense, the problem may be addressed, but it's not being addressed with the speed that is required in order to create the results that we yearn to see. And that is why, again, we need to put a lot of attention to this category of people, because once they are not participating in the development, we are missing out on a key component of the population that should be helping to develop the country. Helping to develop the country and also benefiting from the results of the development.
You see, I think one thing we are forgetting, and I think it's even happening now, if you take, let's say, the NHIS, the amount of people who are on the NHIS and they have to be on there for free because they can't afford it, it puts a lot of pressure on the few who can afford to constantly pay, and all the payment goes to support, so much of the population who, through no fault of theirs, are unable to make any meaningful contribution. Just to add to what you're saying. So, I mean, but yet still, it's not triggering everything to say, look, we need more rich people to make a successful country.
You see, on the contrary, if you look at the percentage of the national resources that are going to support some of these programs, it will amaze you to see that there is still an opportunity to increase the proportion of our national resources that go into it compared to other countries that have made significant progress in helping to reduce the level of poverty. If you look at countries like Brazil and other Latin American countries that have achieved some success in reducing the level of poverty and inequality in their societies, they have made a certain significant contribution. So I think that even though, yes, we are providing these facilities, there's still an opportunity to increase the percentage of the resources that we can pump, in order to address this category of, we're still not doing up to 1.2% of our GDP on these kinds of focus programs that go to address the poor. So I think that is one area that the governments may want to look at, how to send a certain significant proportion, of our GDP to support these categories of people, especially through the social protection programs like the LEAP program. There you can see a significant improvement in their situation, and the returns that the state will get in terms of the contribution that these people will now make to the overall national development will even be greater than the investment that has been made. Moreover, as we discussed earlier, some of these people are children, and we cannot afford to lose the opportunity to give them a way to start life by intervening now. So there is nothing that can be said to be too much at this stage. You know, I think what we're actually not doing, there's an opportunity to improve what we're doing.
Message from Mr. Ochre all the way from Koforidua says, leadership is the biggest culprit of this situation. Political, religion, and chieftaincy. All these professing to champion the cause of their people tend to enslave them without the subjects realizing this unfortunate situation. Look at our church leaders, chiefs, and politicians and compare them to their own subjects. Vast difference. Fairly true.
Valid point. Valid point. And you see, when we say leadership, I think leadership needs to take the right decisions. Leadership needs to put in place the right policies. And that's why I keep referring to the opportunity for the leaders who want to discuss what can be done in order to improve the situation at the national, the forum that took place in May that I refer to. The ideas that have been thrown out, it's up to leadership to pick those ideas and implement, you know. So I agree completely that leadership has a big part to play in addressing the kind of situation that these people find themselves in.
I'm going to take a break, and then when I come back, we'll look at the sort of education that's ending up, you know, ending us up all here, and how much education can do to lift it out of all this quagmire. Don't go. Well, thank you very much for staying. Let me try and catch up with some of the messages that have come in. Bear with me just a second. Let me take this one. It's painful to hear statistics like this. Improving lives, as they say. I feel like weeping for Ghana. Is it proper leadership we lack? Mr. K. from So Menya. Let me see this one. Okay, this is not for me. Let me go back and get this one. It says, Nana, I am a teacher. Let me tell you that Ghanaian children are living in abject poverty, and it's pathetic. Let me get this one. It says, Nana, do we have hardcore poor in the country, and how were they categorized as such? Awotwe in cancer in Tema. Awotwe? Yes, we have people who are abject poor and those who are totally poor. There are people who cannot feed themselves. They literally cannot buy a bowl of kenke to eat to survive. So yes, that's how it's being categorized. Good evening, Nana. Thank you for your educative program. My problem, however, is the definition of poverty. If I'm a civil servant earning less than 1,000 cedis, have 3 children, and my wife is not working, what I earn is not able to sustain my family till the month ends. If you need to embark on any project or even further my education, I just have to take a loan. Will you say that I am not poor because I earn more than $1 a day? This is Dowanya in Wa. Let me give you that question. Let me give you that question. Yeah.
Obviously, even as an organization, UNICEF approach to poverty is using a multidimensional approach. You don't just use only income as a measure of poverty. So you will use other dimensions of well-being, as I've indicated. So when you see most of the child poverty analysis, they also do what we call multiple overlapping deprivations analysis. So you're looking at different dimensions of poverty. So yes, there are many people who are above the poverty line.
No, but this guy is broke, he's not poor.
Good. He says his income, from his income, the description of his income, he might be above the poverty line. But you see, we talk about vulnerability to poverty. So there are people, many people who are above the poverty line, but who are vulnerable to poverty, at least in terms of their income.
But he's saying he can even get a loan, you know. So
good. So once he has a livelihood, that gives him access to some of the means to cope, I think his situation, even though it may not be the best, could be much better than the categories of people who we are talking about, who have much more limited opportunities, both for livelihood and even limited opportunities in accessing social services and financial services. You know, he's talking about going to a bank. Some of these people can't even access social services. They still have barriers to accessing social services, let alone services from the private sector, like financial services. So we sympathize with his situation, but I think
you're not in the poor bracket. You're just broke.
It doesn't belong
Very
to the...
soon you'll be fine. Is it because everybody wants a white-collar job? That's why we are always getting poorer and poorer. Every graduate wants to be in the office. Even an engineer will be in the office and directing people to do jobs instead of him being on the field. From Yakubu Tamale. Yakubu, we haven't gotten to the stage of engineer or graduate. These are people who never stepped in the school, and that's what I was coming to, that 4 out of 10 children, poor children, have never, primary school going age, are not in school.
Good. So that would be a statistic that would shock many in view of the gross enrollment rates that we experience in the country.
4 out of 10.
Good. But that is what happens when you deal with average situations, you know. So it's one marker. You know, we still have quite a significant number of out-of-school children. And this is one of the categories that the nation's program, the social protection programs, need to try and address, because these children who are out of school are being deprived of the capacity to be able to take care of themselves in the future. And these are the categories of people that we think we need to give special attention to. They may not be having access to schools, or schools may be present, but there are other social and economic barriers to accessing these services. And it is only when you have a well thought out and carved out program to target these kinds of people and ensure that you can get them to benefit from education. The standard sector strategy of providing these services will never give them access.
So, I mean, Max, to recap again, this is what is happening in Ghana today as you and I are talking.
For sure. As we speak today, there are still
these are the situations on the ground.
A number of people, a number of households who are experiencing some levels of deprivation. And these people, their stories are not known because we are all basking in the averages. And unless you do a more thorough analysis to see what the variations are within those averages, you will never be able to come to a realization that these categories of people are there, and that the state needs to pay a particular attention in order to meet them at where they are and provide them with the minimum that is required to put them back onto a life of dignity, from where they can now start thinking of working themselves progressively out of poverty.
I thought the LEAP money was poor until I chanced upon some of the reports. I was thinking, well, why would you give somebody 48 CDs for 2 months or something? And according to some of the reports, there were people who in a whole year, the monies that have gone through their hand were 50 pesos for a whole year. So that 48 CDs for 2 months was like, you know, a whole lot of money. So I'm saying if you live in Accra and your Kumasis and you bask in the averages, you almost miss it. Ike from Axim, I don't know where your statistics is coming from. He says, Nana, your program is very educative. 1 out of 4 poor is the urban areas. 2 out of 4 are the rural areas, and 3 out of 4 can't even afford 2 square meals. And these are some of the statistics on the ground. Those who are poor, fortunately, are being deceived for selfish interests of their so-called masters, yet poor people refuse to notice that they are being deceived. You did not add your name, but that's one thing which I really want us to look at, how it is that you can communicate for the guy to realize their plight. I think that's very difficult as a media man. How do I communicate for a community or people to realize that no, I'm living like a pig, I shouldn't live like this? I don't know.
Nana, I think many of these poor households are aware of their situation of poverty. They have aspirations. They wish they can take their children to school. They wish they can give their children more nutritious food. And when you talk to them, you can see that they are aware that they are deprived in these areas. As I've indicated, I think part of the problem is voice. The fact that there has not been sufficient voice that has been given to their kinds of situation. So I think that once we have people who are aware of their situation, and once the state finds the situation unacceptable, irrespective of what they think of their situation, there needs to be action. There needs to be action. And that's why actions, policies such as working in the agricultural sector, where majority, we're talking about the averages and the differences that you have between rural and urban. One of the texters referred to the 1 in 4 as an urban situation. The urban situation that's the national average. The 1 in 4 is the national average. The rural situation is about 3 to 4 times the urban. It's about 10% in the urban and about 30% in the rural. Okay, so poverty is also largely a rural phenomenon. Poverty is also predominant among people who are engaged in agriculture. So when you work on the agricultural sector and help to improve the productivity of the agricultural sector, that's one effective way of helping these categories of people. And that was one of the areas, one of the sectors that the dialogue, the inclusive forum identified, that the state should make a focus on the agricultural sector as one of the sectors to promote growth. And that way you can get many of the people contributing to the development and benefiting from the rewards of
also,
growth.
But you see, at this rate, you probably even run the risk of people with such low IQ that they may not be able to make any meaningful contribution. We run the risk of breeding a society that has such low IQ, they may not be able to do the simplest of things. And I say that because if you look at the number of children who die before age 5, because the mother didn't know that, let me just boil the water. I mean, it sounds so simple, but to say that I gave birth and I didn't know that the water was too dirty for the baby, it's worrying.
Yes, Nana. There are some situations where services are absent. Okay? If you took a look around the country, there are still some communities where access to basic services, these services geographically are not within their reach. There are also areas where you have these services available, but they are excluded either because of their ethnicity, because of their disability, some other social factors, or they are excluded because of economic factors. These are some of the major causes of their inability to utilize these services. I concede that there may still be communities where mothers are not aware of the need to adopt some of those practices to utilize, yes. But while we work through other communication ways of getting these people to change their behavior, I'm tempted to think that the bigger issue, there's a bigger issue of addressing the issue of service availability and taking away the barriers for these poor people to be able to access these services. Because if a mother cannot access health services and the child dies before age 5, it's a deprivation, which is not only an income deprivation, but it's a deprivation arising from lack of access to health services.
Because of some of the messages, this is Bagoluri from Nandole. So most of the few rich capitalize on the social intervention to build their riches. And then this one says, I wish your crew can come and witness the real poverty in Kadi in the suburb of Binduri, Fatao in Boko. So there are people out there, those in the cities who are, I like your word, basking in averages. These are the real situation. Ali says, there's no need to ask for definition for poverty. Poverty is what we see around us. The little resource is unfairly distributed, and a part of the problem is abro ni beye. Sometimes, you most attempted to agree with that. Nana, you should have invited the politicians who proclaim that they are changing lives. In fact, the level of disparity in this country is wide. Comparing opportunities in the south to north, it takes conscious efforts to deal with this canker. Looking at the microeconomic indicators, the economy is indeed in trouble. Poverty is a killer, and we need to fight by creating sustainable jobs and effective pricing systems. Derek in Cape Coast. This one says, oh no, you've sent it. Oh, yeah, Nana, if the video you are showing definitely identify a poor home, then 1 out of 4 was based on the regional capitals. Let me see. Yeah, let me give you the closing word.
Okay, good. So from the messages that are coming in, we can see that a lot of people are picking up the information. They are disgusted, they are surprised, some are not, because they are aware of what the situation is. But I think that is just the starting point of the discussion. The essence is to bring the issues of inequality to the forefront, so that all the people who are in the position to make decisions can be aware of the scale of the problem and can take the most practical and urgent steps that are needed to address the situation.
Thank you very much. This is Maxwell Kunyin. Yeah?
Yes,
Kunyin from UNICEF. I'll get him back here next week. But before I go, quickly, Multi-TV is organizing the Kumkum Mobile Clinic in Koforidua Tutua House from now to the 26th of November. The clinic is designed for customers with faulty boxes or having signal problems to get it resolved. All viewers living around Koforidua and its environs are encouraged to visit the stands from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day. For details, call 0244 748 874 0244 748 874. Thank you very much for watching. Tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. My shirt, as usual, was supplied by Tanti's Fashions. Thank you very much. Also, thank you.
You're welcome.